first video, I illustrated some of the concepts of graphing with free software Gnumeric. And one of the limitations that Gnumeric has is that for most people, you will have to virtualize it to be able to use it. And that's the only downside that I can see. It only takes a little bit of effort to run the software, which I'm showing right now through a virtualization. In another tutorial, I will be demonstrating how to install Gnumeric and how to get it running on your operating system. And like I said, all it requires is a little bit of effort and you're gonna have amazing high quality graphs all the time. The software is very easy to use. If anyone here has used Microsoft Excel 2003 or Lotus 123, Microsoft 2007, this first presentation looks very similar. Even to modern Excel, it's very similar. So the first thing that we do when we start graphing is to enter data. And I'm gonna quickly do this. I'm just gonna write sessions. And I need some data. Frequency followed by PC major, minor, and comments. I like to have comments on my data to know what's going on. There's no such thing as session 0, so I'm gonna start it with 1. Let's go up to 20. Just some random data. PC majors for phase change lines. There's ways of doing this. I'm gonna put 0 here and then another 0 here. So here we have fixed ratio of 5, and then here we have FR 10. Fixed ratio of 10. The name of the behavior of interest. Behavior. Now we have data to graph in a line graph. So how do we create a line graph using this free software? Very easy, I promise. I'm gonna do it without even highlighting, just to show how easy it is. Chart. What do I need? I need an XY with the lines right there. Forward. And now I'm greeted to this canvas style of creating graphs. And like I said, and like I promised, it's very easy to use. So the first series that I have, you have to think, what does a graph need? Alright, the first thing we gotta get rid of is this gray background. We don't need that. So we're just gonna change the color to white. We don't need that line, get rid of it. The chart, we don't want a line outside of it, so we're gonna get rid of that as well. We're not gonna be wasting any ink. Next, padding. We need to apply padding, but before I go into the padding, I'm gonna start adding the data. So yes, we're in sheet 1, X. Here are my values for the X and the Y. As you can see, it's the same behavior as Excel. And I'm gonna go ahead and insert it right now. That looks about right. Kind of like it to go a little bit further out. Okay. It needs general standard graph. We see the problems that we would have in Excel. 0, 0 over here. We want to float that. This is in blue. We want to convert that to black. Easy. Let me just add this value here, 5.5 and 12.5. I'll explain why I did that later on. And let me just go ahead and add some color to that. Yeah, that's right. There we go. We have some colors. We know where there was a phase change. So we can have baseline, intervention, and a modification to the intervention. So we click on the graph and then we right click in properties, and once again we're greeted with the same screen to modify the graph. Let's go to the x-axis. The maximum data point that we have is 20. Not 25. First change. The data does not start at 0, it starts at 1. Piece of cake. Usually for graphs like these I like to start with 2, but if I wanted to have 1 just to show that, I would. Next, we're gonna start floating these values. Easy. No tricks. One, we're gonna go to from scale to layout, and we're on padding. We're gonna click. It was a 0. Look over here. You see that? We're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have just floated the 0 value. But there's more to be done. I'm gonna click apply just to show it. I don't like it when the number is right on top of the line. Right here. To me that looks horrible. So on the x-axis we just applied a padding of 5, and from experience the padding of 5 on both axes looks great. So let's go back into the graph. Just gonna make this a little bit bigger again. Y-axis, padding of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's 5. We just separated both of them. Great. We're on our way on having a professional, great, good looking graph. Let's see. Our maximum is not 25, it's actually 22. Minimum 0, okay, that makes sense. 2. Maximum ticks. Just gonna go, whoa, not 22. As you can see, now that shows the max. Very easy to understand this graph so far on the changes that we're doing. We're gonna go back in it and edit again. Let's see, what's wrong here with the line? Oh, it's blue. Oh, okay, that's easy to fix. Style, definitely not blue. We're gonna go with black. Markers, I like the circle. And the problem right now that we have with the circle is simple. It's blue. We're gonna make it, we can make it black if we want, and the outline white. If you make it black and the outline white, it's gonna work out fine. But if you really want to be reducing the ink, I suggest you put in the fill in white and the outline black. Now you're reducing ink. This saves money. And that's what it's really about. Saving money. And apply. As you can see, we have made our first simple steps to creating a professional, good looking, high quality graph. I'm going to go back in it again because it needs other markers. It needs data labels, it needs phase change lines, it needs all that goodies stuff that we typically add in a graph. It's missing, and we want to go ahead and add that. Let's see, what can we do here? Okay, simple. X-axis, it needs a label. So how do we add a label using Gnumeric? We click on add, and we're going to look for label, and we're going to call this sessions. The font, we can change the font Sans looks, I like sans, but we're gonna use Times New Roman. And we should do the same thing for the fonts down here. And we should do it also for the y-axis. Let's change that over to times. Now, the y-axis also needs a label to describe what's going on. And in this case, we're calling the behavior of interest hits. So we go add, and we look for what we need, label. We're going to change that font over to Times New Roman as well. And we're going to call it frequency of hits. We're on our way on completing this graph. It doesn't really need a title. So far the data is clear. We have here frequency of hits. We can see what's going on. No change. And what in the world is going on with this data? Okay. We need to add a major phase change line and a minor phase change line. Let's do that right now. Add. We could add a series, but we're not gonna be adding a series. We're gonna do it the other way around. So we have an x-axis, we can add another x-axis, and that is the best approach for this. We're gonna add one, and we're gonna add another one. Okay, so I'm gonna explain the reason for this. So here we have this, and then the position for the first one, which is the major, and add major grid lines. Right there's the first major grid line. Now the axis line itself, I don't want to display that, but I will apply the same thing outside. I'm gonna put it low, need to add the padding. Gonna put them together so that it does not display. And the color of this, okay? Let's take a look at it. We have our first line. So here we would have baseline followed by FR5, and then we need to have a dash line because we're going over to FR10. Nothing really has changed thus far. So we repeat the process. We go back to x-axis and we go add axis to, now we have the same thing. Outside show label low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and positions. Labels. We need the dash line. And now we're gonna go ahead and add the major grid line. Here we go. Apply. So now we have a solid line and a dash line. So the advantage of this is if I add another intervention, say 15.5, and I put another 0 here, and I'm gonna call this FR5. It's just a minor modification, and now you can see that I have a solid line followed by a dash line and another dash line. It just makes sense. So these are small modifications to it. I'm gonna change that to FR8. And then the last step that we're missing is adding the labels to it, and that one requires a small little trick. It requires going into chart, or you can go into graph, and then you click add title. We're gonna put a dot here just so that it brings it down. It's a nice little trick. And the font color, we're just gonna make that white so that it doesn't even show. And now let's keep adding titles to this. Title, add title, and add title to chart 1. Now in Excel you would most likely be creating text boxes over the data, but I really don't like doing that with this software. So on all the fonts I typically change them to Times New Roman, but the reason I don't like to do it is because it allows you to export the graph without having any of the worries that you would typically have in an Excel document where you transfer it over to Word and then the formatting goes completely off. You have a floating text box somewhere else in the document and then it moves somewhere else. It really drives me crazy, so that's why I like using this software. And I'm just adding now the labels. So the first one is baseline. Here we go. And the position of it, I'm gonna put it manual. Now, disadvantage to doing the labels like this is that they will always be in the same place no matter what. The alignment is always perfect. Next one, FR5. Let me make sure I change the font. Times New Roman. Position, again manual. Here we have our FR5. Ooh, I'm gonna need another label. Title 4, we have FR, okay, that's FR10. Position of this, again, is gonna be manual. And the last one, FR8. Text, fonts, manual. So let's just quickly take a look on how that graph looks like. And what you can see from it right off the get-go is that it's bold and it's kind of taking away from the data. So let's go ahead and remove some of that ink. Let's start with this one. Ooh, just one regular. Ooh, that's sans. Times New Roman, regular. Again, font, regular. Just make sure they're all times. Okay, perfect. And we're missing this one. And apply. There we go. Our first simple graph using free software. Now, one of the criticisms that I gotten with this software is when you look at the zero value, it is elevated, but this line here is not touching the vertical line used for the phase change line. It's not touching the horizontal line. And thinking about it, if you're trying to reduce and minimize the amount of ink that's being used, is it really necessary? Or is it just a matter of preference? Does it alter or change the meaning of the data in any way? The answer is no. You can clearly see that this here was baseline, followed by the intervention, a modification to the intervention, followed by another modification to the intervention. Honestly, this is pretty good. You floated the zero, easy, very easy to use, and you can do other cool things to the graph. Aside from drawing lines, I'm gonna go ahead and just copy this. And we have again a replication of the data, and I'm gonna change this to ounces of water. Need to go to the label. survey of data, this is something that you would require a doctor to recommend how many ounces of water a client may need. But let's say it has a goal of a minimum of 14 ounces. How would you show that in this graph so that you can communicate that information crystal clear? Well, remember how I added another axis line? That is the same thing that I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do it now to the y-axis. So I'm gonna add like a goal line of whenever the goal is being met. And okay, I'm here. We go add axis line. We have it there. Now we need to add a major. And for that, we go here to the axis line. We go on ticks, position, and I'm gonna say it was 16. I do not want to show the axis line. I just want a simple clear line to show the goal. And I can just put a goal. And it's missing something. There's things here I don't like. The layout, the padding, we're gonna make sure it's a padding of 5 so that it's all uniform and aligned. Then we're gonna remove that. We don't need that line. Actually, we do want to show the labels, but we really don't want to show the line. So the style, we're just gonna get rid of that. And right there we have a goal line. So right here, in terms of ounces of water consumed, under the FRA the goal was met once, but this treatment overall is not effective. And that is just a nice way. I can also modify the color of the line because that's not needed. Let me see. Okay, major grid line, and I don't want black. I want a lighter color to not take away from the data. There we go. I can get all fancy with this graph and make it look a lot nicer, but it's to give you an idea. And that is precisely the same way that I changed the numbers on the graph. So if I wanted to have a graph with the following values, I'm just gonna go to sheet 2. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 values. Let me see. Actually, first I need sessions. I'm just gonna go to 10. And then I need a code. 1, 2, 3. Independent, verbal, and modeled. So we'll go here. 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And my values, when we go ahead and graph this data over here, insert chart XY. I'm just gonna change the y-axis on it, forward. I'm gonna focus on this one. One data begins at 1 and ends at 3. Okay, now we have something. And now we have to go ahead and invert axes. There we go. But how do we get it to show independent, verbal, and modeled? Easy. Add axis line to it. Text, ticks, position. 1, 2, 3. Labels. IVM. And insert. So here we have that graph that I was talking about. Now we have I, V, and M. Piece of cake. Now all we gotta do is just get rid of the old axis line, not displayed anymore. So spam, layout, outside, show labels, got rid of that. This one we're gonna move it to the other side, so from low we're gonna go to high. The back pane, that needs to be white, no lines. The graph, okay, none. Chart, no lines right there. Back pane white. There we go. And apply. Now we have just replaced the numbers with letter values on the graph. If we ever want to show like a prompting level, easy. And to float this, it's the same thing. X-axis, spam, whoops. We go to layout and we add a padding of 5. And we should do the same thing to the Y to add a padding of 5 as well. Now we want to do that to where it matters. Right there. Apply. It's floated. It looks good. And remember, you want to get rid of all the ink that's colored. That is expensive. The real reason for having black ink is not because it's clear. Sometimes using colors can help highlight the differences depending on how they're used, but the reason is that color ink is expensive compared to black ink. It's black ink, you can get like a huge box of black ink at very affordable prices depending on the printer that you're using. And there you go, you have a professional good looking graph. Obviously you need to add the labels to the X and the Y axes, but that's easy to do. You just go to X-axis, add label, and then you say what's the name of the label. So that should be sessions, and then Y, add labels, and prompt level. Easy graph to understand. There's only 10 sessions. Change the scale, make sure it reflects 10. There is no 0, we never started the session on 0, so we changed that as well. And it doesn't take away anything from the data in the presentation of it. If you push it a little bit far, if you get rid of this layout, I think that looks tacky for a line graph, but you can actually do this on the X-axis. If you really wanted to do that, you could do that. I don't recommend it for a line graph. It looks kind of weird, but you could. For a bar graph, it looks better and it makes more sense, but not for a line graph. And all of it just needs to make sense in what you're doing. And I'm just highlighting some of the capabilities of the software. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this simple tutorial on how to use Gnumeric, and thank you.